take me down to Dashcam stories where the cars are fast and they crash in glory. Oh, Wham, Bam, Dashcam!
Kenya was heading home from Starbucks when the driver of a blue Hyundai made an illegal U-turn and Kenya wasn't able to avoid hitting her. The other driver fixed her front bumper cover with tape or bungees or whatever that all is before Kenya was able to take a picture of her car. She then refused to take responsibility for causing the collision. Kenya made a police report and is now waiting for a repair estimate. Nelson was driving down a California highway when he encountered a CHP traffic brake, which is when a patrol vehicle drives back and forth slowly across all lanes of a highway to slow down traffic for an incident up ahead. Nelson and most other drivers noticed the sea of red brake lights ahead and came to a stop, but one driver behind Nelson wasn't paying attention and rear-ended another vehicle at highway speed. The vehicle that was initially hit was pushed past Nelson and into several other vehicles. Thankfully, Nelson wasn't involved in the collision. He was late for work, so didn't stay, but he hopes everyone else was okay. David was taking a scenic drive down Santiago Canyon Road when an impatient oncoming driver used the shoulder to overtake traffic after David began coming toward him. The speeding driver was already making an illegal overtake when he was forced to the shoulder to avoid hitting David head-on. David told us lots of drivers want to go fast on the curvy road, but with few passing opportunities, many of them choose to make illegal passes rather than slowing down, leading to many fatal collisions. Here's something Chuck didn't expect to see. A BMW driver was speeding down a wet highway when they lost control and slammed into a guardrail. Chuck called 911 to report the incident, and later when he came back the other way, the BMW was gone. Chuck, who was also driving a BMW he's had for a month, told us this was technically an example of a BMW driver failing to signal while changing lanes. Don't be one of those BMW drivers, Chuck. Break the cycle. Nilette had just gotten off a highway and was going through a roundabout when he encountered what might be the most extreme case of road debris we've seen so far. Nilette believes this was part of a manufactured home that had dropped onto the road. Can you imagine the conversation between the first responders? All units, please respond to the highway off-ramp roundabout for a housewarming party. Dispatch, this homeowner does not appear to have the proper permits for street parking. Could you send an estate trooper? Joshua was on his way to Georgia for a wedding when it had just started raining. While driving down a highway at 75 miles per hour, his Nissan Altima suddenly lost control and began spinning. Joshua pulled over to collect himself after narrowly avoiding what could have been a bad wreck. Thankfully, nothing was damaged, and he was able to resume his trip after catching his breath.
Holy.
Brian was driving when he watched an impatient driver run a red light and get T-boned by an SUV.
Other people who are heavily tattooed.
Brian pulled into a nearby parking lot. When law enforcement arrived, he gave them his information so they could request his dashcam footage. Mr. Llama was about to turn left through an intersection when a Prius driver drove straight through his lane, from a lane that's only allowed to turn left. When even a llama can see the signs and road markings you missed, you know you're doing something wrong. Thankfully, Mr. Llama was able to stop and avoid a collision with the headstrong hybrid. The trucker who sent us this video was waiting for a green light before turning because he had a heavy load and couldn't accelerate very quickly. It seems that another trucker couldn't wait and decided to cut in front of him.
Hey!
The other truck's trailer clipped the corner of our submitter's Freightliner, removing a headlight and part of the front bumper. The other truck sustained a deflated tire, and both drivers immediately pulled over. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, and the two truckers were able to laugh it off with no hard feelings after settling the issue with the police and their insurance providers. Dave was passing an intersection notorious for vehicle collisions when two drivers pulled onto the road in front of him at the same time, blocking both lanes. Thankfully, David was able to thread the needle and pass between the two vehicles without making contact. After that, he told us he went on his merry way. This submitter was approaching a green light when it turned yellow. He decided to continue through it, which is completely legal in the state of Illinois, even if the light turns red after entering the intersection. We checked. An oncoming driver in the left turn lane failed to yield to our submitter before colliding with his Toyota Sienna. Both drivers pulled over and exchanged information before continuing. We've already seen plenty of bad drivers in this episode, but we know there's one particular kind of bad driver you're all waiting to see. This week's Tesla behaving badly.
That Tesla man can't drive.
Nick watched a Tesla driver skip around traffic by going straight through an intersection from a turn lane. He pointed out that they did give a nice wave to absolve their sin. This submitter was driving along in her Nissan Armada when the driver of a yellow minivan cut across the street and got T-boned by an Infiniti SUV. Our submitter stopped and exchanged information with the victim so she could later send her a copy of her dashcam footage. She told us Albuquerque's drivers are some of the worst in the country. Ravi and his wife Aisha were on their way to celebrate her birthday when the traffic in front of them unexpectedly came to a standstill. As the Ford Fiesta in front of him rear-ended a Land Rover, Ravi slammed on the brakes and swerved into the other lane. He couldn't believe what had happened and told us he felt like he was in a Fast and Furious movie. Ravi told us he'd been wishing to capture some dashcam footage to send us, but he now realizes he should be careful what he wishes for. He's glad what happened wasn't any worse, and so are we. Eric witnessed a hit and run.
Oops. And he just flees.
After the responsible party fled, Eric turned around to find the victim and give them a copy of his dashcam footage, but they'd already left the scene. Logan was heading home from Walmart when he approached a green light. Suddenly, the driver of a black SUV ran their red light before stopping right in front of him. Logan honked and braked before waiting patiently for the other driver to get out of the way. He told us our channel inspired him to get a dashcam, and he's glad that he did. Ahmed was on his way to a funeral when he was rear-ended by another driver. When Ahmed slowed down gradually for traffic, an inattentive driver behind him rear-ended his vehicle at high speed. Ahmed told us this collision happened just 3 months after the last time he was rear-ended, which we showed in episode 67. Thankfully, the other driver admitted fault. Fixing Ahmed's car cost around $3,000 US. Angie was headed home from work when a white SUV went flying past her down the interstate, weaving between her and other vehicles before getting stuck in traffic. After getting trapped behind another SUV and forced to slow down, the other driver made their way across lanes before continuing their reckless journey. Ethan had to stop for highway traffic when he noticed the driver behind him wasn't slowing down. Even though Ethan began moving to the shoulder to avoid a collision, the other vehicle hit his Volkswagen Jetta at around 50 miles per hour. Ethan called 911, then waited for first responders to arrive. While Ethan was speaking with the California Highway Patrol, another driver on the other side of the highway became distracted by the scene and rear-ended someone else. This time, nobody needed to call 911. The other driver's insurance provider fixed Ethan's Jetta at the cost of $700 US. Ethan told us he was sentenced to bed rest for minor injuries resulting from the collision. Leighton was driving along with his fiancée when they encountered a bear making its way across the highway.
Babe! That was a bear! I told you we have them.
Clearly, Leighton's fiancée was very excited, as she's never seen a bear in the 4 years she's lived in this area. They kept driving after the bear walked back into the woods. They thanked us for our videos and told us they absolutely love them. If you're a fan, be sure to check out the exclusive perks available to our Patreon supporters, like our private Discord server at the link below.
Wham, bam, we got a Patreon man. Please support the show.